What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to The Common Coder. My name is Josh, and in this video I'm going to be showing you how to deploy a React application to GitHub Pages. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so before we get started, we're going to go over a couple prerequisites that we're going to need in order to make this work. So if you're following along, you need to make sure that you've installed Git, that you've created a GitHub account, that you've set up your SSH keys, that you have uploaded or pushed your project up to GitHub, and you understand the basics of GitHub Pages. So if you haven't done any of these things or need a refresher on a few of them, I actually have videos for every single one of these topics that I'll link down in the description. So check those out if you need a little refresher, if you need to learn what some of these things are, and then jump back over to this video when you're ready to publish your React application to GitHub Pages. All right, so in order to publish a React-based application, or basically anything that requires a build step, so this would also work with Angular, Vue, any other kind of built JavaScript framework that puts out static assets inside of a dist folder. There's two ways to basically publish an application like this to GitHub Pages. The first one is to publish from a branch. And so we're going to use a package called GH Pages in order to help us out with this. And then the second option is using something called GitHub Actions, which is a utility that GitHub provides to allow us to automate deployment steps, build steps, run tests, all kinds of different things. So that's very much in the realm of something that they call DevOps, which is basically the deployment piece and the various tooling that's involved to get your application from its source code out into production. All right, so let's go ahead and check out the first deployment method and deploy our React application from a branch. All right, so on my screen here, I have a React application that I created using Vite, and I basically just gave it the name of GitHub Pages React. So this is the name of my project. It's also the name of my repository. I have created that repository up on GitHub. So we can go ahead and take a look at GitHub. Go ahead and refresh this real quick. And you can see that here is that application in GitHub. And the only thing that I've changed is inside of the source folder. I have changed the text inside of app.jsx to say hello from gh-pages. Okay, so this is the library that we're going to use to help us with the deployment here. So we're going to verify that this was deployed using this method. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we need to do here. So the very first thing that we need to do is go into our project. So I'm using VS Code for this demo. You can use whatever editor that you choose. I like the Git integration and the various tooling that VS Code provides, especially for front-end web development projects. But what we're going to do is go ahead and install the GH Pages package. So we'll say npm install --save -dev. So this is a dev dependency inside of our project. And dev dependency just means that it's not required for the application to run. It's a developer tool that's going to help us either develop or deploy the application. So in this case, we're going to install the GH Pages package. All right, and so once that package is installed, we can go ahead and check out our package.json, and we can see that GH Pages was added to our dev dependency list. And now what we need to do is go ahead and add a script, actually a couple scripts to our script sections here. So we have a dev script, and we can check this out if we go ahead and run npm run dev. We can just check out the application real quick. And you can see this is what it's going to look like once it's deployed, basically using Vite, which is what I created the project with. It's a React template inside of Vite. And then it's got this text down here, hello from GH Pages. All right, so let's go ahead and get this up into GitHub Pages. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and kill the dev server. And then inside of the script sections, I need to add two new scripts. So the first one is going to be a script called pre-deploy. And what this is going to do is run the build script. And you can see that we have a build script here, which is Vite build. And when we run this, this is going to build the application and stick it in an output folder, which I believe is build. And we'll just double check that here in just a second. So pre-deploy, we're going to go ahead and have this script run npm run build. And then we're going to have a deploy script. And this deploy script is going to run the GH Pages command -d and then build. All right, and this actually needs to be dist instead of build because it's going to run the GitHub Pages command with the directory of dist. So you can see if we run our build command, which is npm run build, you can see that Vite builds to a folder called dist instead of build. So when we run the GitHub Pages command, we're going to want to look in the dist directory for our files. All right, so now that we have that out of the way, the last thing that we need to do is add another key to package.json, and this is going to be called homepage. And we're going to set this to the web address of where our GitHub Pages file is going to be located. So since we're using a project here, we're going to get a project-based GitHub Pages URL. So this is going to look like https:// and then the-common coder.github.io. So this will be whatever your GitHub username is, and then / the name of the repository. So in this case, it's going to be github-pages-react. All right, so with those changes, we should be able to go ahead and commit these changes. We'll say add scripts and homepage. Go ahead and push those up. All right, now we can go ahead and deploy our site using the GitHub Pages scripts that we just created. So what we're going to do is run this deploy script, which is going to run this right before that. So it's going to run pre-deploy, which is going to build our project, stick it in the dist folder, and then it's going to go ahead and deploy that project from the dist folder using this GH Pages package. And it's going to do all that behind the scenes and publish those to a branch on our GitHub account. So let's go ahead and see that. Go ahead and type npm run deploy. All right, you can see that there's some output here. It says it was published. And what we can do is go over to GitHub. And now we can see here there are two branches. If I go ahead and click on this, there is my main branch, and there is this GitHub Pages branch. So if we go ahead and click into it, we can see that here is just the build output. So there's no source folder, there's no package.json, no node modules, none of that stuff. All we have in here is our build output. So we just have the bundled assets here. So inside of assets, we can see here here's our JavaScript, here's our CSS, and here is the SVG for the React logo. So everything is being bundled into these files, and we can load it up using this index.html. So let's go ahead and configure GitHub Pages to look at this branch. Let's go ahead and go into settings, click on pages, and then in this section here, what we want to make sure that this is set to deploy from a branch. So if it's currently set to GitHub Actions, I want to go ahead and change it to deploy from a branch. And then right here, we're going to want to make sure that this is on the gh-pages branch. So if it's on none or main, go ahead and flip it to the GH Pages branch. Once you do that, you want to go ahead and click save, and that will kick off a build of the application, which we can see over here in the Actions tab. We can see that just 1 minute ago, it ran the pages build and deployment. I can click on this to get a little bit more information, but what I really want to see is if I go over to my settings, click on the Pages tab, and it tells me my site is live at the URL, and it was deployed 2 minutes ago. And if I go ahead and click on this now, we should be able to see our React application. And we still have some errors because it's looking for my assets in the wrong spot. And I thought we fixed this. All right, so we did add our homepage here, but there's one last thing that we forgot to do, which is inside of our Vite config. So when we run our build, so let's go ahead and run npm run build. It's assuming that everything is being served out of this folder and that we're not underneath a subdirectory like we are when deployed to GitHub Pages. So if we look in our dist folder inside of our index, it's looking for things at root/assets, which is not where our files are located. They're under /GitHub Pages /assets/ whatever the name is. So to fix this, we just need to go into the Vite config.js and add a base property to the configuration. And this is going to be set to the name of our project, which is going to be /GitHub Pages React / and then this will be the base for our application. So if I go ahead and run the build again, now we can see in our index, this should be pointing to the right spot. So what we want to do is go ahead and commit this change. So we'll say fix base path. Go ahead and commit that. We'll go ahead and push this to our main branch. And then we'll go ahead and deploy the changes to GitHub Pages using the GH Pages package. So we'll say npm run deploy. Remember, that is our script that we added inside of package.json. And so this is going to deploy using GitHub Pages after it runs the build. And we can see that it was published here. And if we go over into GitHub and take a look at the actions, we can see that our build is in progress. So it's building based on that deployment that I just made. You can go ahead and click in here to check the status, shows that it's in progress. And then after a minute or so, we should be able to check our site on GitHub Pages. All right, and we can see that this build has finished. We can actually see it shows the URL here, so we can just go ahead and click it here. And boom, there is our site. And we can see hello from GitHub Pages. So this is how we can use the GH Pages package to deploy our project to a branch and then deploy it from that branch whenever we want to. However, as you probably have noticed, this is a very manual process. So anytime we want to trigger that deployment, we have to basically run that deploy script from our local or configure some other type of tooling to basically publish that whenever we want to. So we can actually simplify this a little bit. The setup's a little more complicated, but the implementation is a lot simpler. So we can set up a custom action to basically watch for changes on our main branch. And then anytime we publish changes to our main branch, GitHub Actions will build the project and deploy it to GitHub Pages automatically without us having to deploy from a branch and running that manual deploy step. So let's go ahead and take a look at that next. All right, so I'm back here in Visual Studio Code, and what we need to do is go ahead and set this up for the deployment using GitHub Actions. So with this, we're not going to need the GH Pages package, so let's go ahead and remove that. Let's say npm uninstall gh-pages. All right, and that will remove it from our package.json, which you can see here. Next thing that we're going to do is go into the package.json again and remove the deploy and pre-deploy scripts because we're not going to need those either. And we'll go ahead and save that. And with those changes, we'll go ahead and commit these changes by staging the files, and we'll just say remove GH Pages. Let me just push this back up to main. So if we're not using GitHub Pages, how exactly can we build and deploy our app? Actually, what GH Pages does behind the scenes is it uses a series of GitHub Actions that are associated with basically publishing your changes to a specific branch. Like I said, that works, but we can simplify things a bit and basically watch our main branch for changes and then automatically deploy on the back end to the GitHub Pages environment. And so let's go ahead and see what that actually looks like. So to do that, what we're going to do is go ahead and utilize GitHub Actions. So we saw Actions already. This Pages build and deployment is something that is provided to us by that GH Pages package. And you can see if we go into the jobs, there's a build job, a report build status job, and a deploy job. In this build job, you can actually see all the various steps that are in here. So it's basically using this build pages, it's checking out the code, it's running a build, it's uploading the artifact, doing some post checkout steps, and then completing the job. It's also reporting the status, and then finally doing the deployment. So there's some stuff happening here behind the scenes that's all pre-configured for you when you're using that GH Pages workflow. However, we can write our own custom workflow and skip that whole step of having to manually run that deployment script. So to do this, what we need to do is create our own custom action. So to create our own custom action, we're going to go back into VS Code, go ahead and go into our file explorer here. And what we're going to do is create another folder called .github. And then inside of that folder, we're going to go ahead and create another folder called workflows. And then inside of the workflows folder, we're going to create a file called build.yaml, which is going to be YML. And YAML is just another markup language. And that's actually what it stands for. YAML is yet another markup language. And it's commonly used for configuration type stuff, providing instructions to sets of code. So it's very popular in GitHub Pages. It's also used quite heavily in like Swagger docs. So if you're familiar with any type of like API development or anything like that, very common inside of the Swagger Open API documentation. But anyways, what we're going to do is go ahead and configure our job to build our application with GitHub Actions and then deploy it to GitHub Pages behind the scenes. All right, so one thing that we're going to need to do before we write this is actually change the permissions on our repo. So if we go into our settings of our repository, go into the Actions tab over here on the left, click on General, and then what we're going to want to do is change the workflow permissions to allow read and write. Okay, so it's going to build. That build process is going to produce our artifacts that are going to be deployed to GitHub Pages, and we need to allow GitHub Actions to work with those. And to do that, it needs to have read and write permissions. All right, so what we're going to go ahead and do is go back to VS Code, and we're going to write some YAML. So the first thing that we're going to do for this action is give it a name. So let's say name. And we'll go ahead and call this build and deploy to GitHub Pages. All right, so that's going to be the name of our job. That's what's going to show up in the Actions tab, and we're going to configure this so that way it runs on pushes to main and also on something called a workflow dispatch, meaning we can invoke it anytime that we want to. So we're going to say on, and then first one is going to be push, and specifically it's going to be push to branches, and what we want in here is our main branch. So basically this is going to run on push to branches main, and we're also going to run it or allow it to be run on workflow underscore dispatch. All right, so the next thing that we're going to do is set the permissions. So let's go ahead and go back down to the root level now. So indentation is important here. So we need to be at the root level, and we're going to go ahead and type permissions. And what we want is for the contents, we're going to read. For the pages, we're going to write. And the ID token is also going to be write. All right, next thing we're going to do is go ahead and set up the jobs we want to run. So there's various things that need to happen here. We need to check out the code, we need to build it, and then we need to deploy it. So what we're going to go ahead and do is run our jobs. So we'll say jobs, and first job is going to be build. Well, actually, it's just one job with several steps. So we'll go ahead and call this job build and deploy. Oops. All right, and here we're going to choose the system that it's going to run on. Most commonly, it's going to be Ubuntu, which is a Linux virtual machine or container, if you will. So it's going to say runs on, then Ubuntu latest. Then next thing that we're going to do is provide our steps. And these are the various stages of our job. And so every time I go a level deep, I'm just using tab. And these indentations are how YAML keeps track of which properties belong to which section. So with this, we're going to go ahead and give this a name. So we'll say name, and this is going to be checkout. All right, so this is going to check out our source code, basically do a git checkout from our main branch. And this is going to use, we're going to use uses as the way you provide this, and it's going to be actions. And these are actions that GitHub provides to us that we can use inside of our workflows. So it's going to be using actions, checkout at v4, and this name needs to have a dash here. Name uses, there we go. All right, and then we're going to go ahead and set up node. So we'll say name, set up node, and this is going to be uses actions, set up node at v4. Again, this is another action that GitHub provides to us. And specifically, we want to use whatever version of Node we're using on my machine. So if I say node-v, I'm using Node 20. So we'll go ahead and say with, and then node version 20. All right, so we're going to check out the code. We're going to make sure Node is set up using version 20. And now what we're going to do is go ahead and install dependencies. I'll say name, install dependencies. And so what we're going to do here is run a command, and what we're going to run is npm ci, which does a clean install. All right, and so once we do that, we can go ahead and build the project. So I'll say name, build project. And then what we're going to do is go ahead and run npm run build. So npm run build. Once it's built, we're going to go ahead and upload the artifacts from the build. So we'll say name, upload, build, output. We'll say /artifacts. It's like the technical term for it. So upload, build, output artifacts. That's going to use another action that GitHub provides to us called upload pages artifact. So we'll say actions /upload pages artifacts at v3. And we're going to go ahead and give that a name. So we have to say with. This name can really be anything. I'm going to say GHP React build. And then the path is going to be dist. Okay, so remember our Vite application builds to a folder called dist. And so this is going to upload those artifacts to GitHub Pages from our dist folder. All right, so we're almost done here. So once it's uploaded, then we need to go ahead and deploy it. And so that deploy step is going to be the next one. So this is going to be -name deploy to GitHub Pages. All right, and this is going to use another action that GitHub provides called deploy pages. So it's going to be uses actions /deploy pages at v4. And with, so to do the deployment, we need a token. And this token is provided to us by GitHub. We can automatically infer it using these curly braces here, so we don't actually have to provide it. And this also needs a $sign. So $, double curly braces, and it's going to be secrets.github in all caps _token. And then the artifact name that we're going to deploy is going to be the same name that we gave it here. Okay, so we're going to say name or artifact name. Artifact name, yep. And it's going to be GHP React build. All right, so this is our new job. And what we want to do here to make sure that when this runs, we are deploying what we think we're deploying, which is using this script here to build from the main branch or on workflow dispatch. So let's go ahead and just make a change to our application so that we can see that it is getting rebuilt and redeployed using this custom action. So I'm going to say hello from GitHub Actions deployment. All right, so I have 2 changes. I'm gonna go ahead and stage these changes and commit. Let's say GitHub Actions workflow or GitHub Pages and index update. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and commit these changes, and I'm gonna go ahead and run git push to push them up. Now I'm on the main branch, so GitHub should automatically see that I have added that workflow inside of my .github workflows folder. And as soon as I push this up, it should immediately kick off that job because we have specified that we want to run the job on any pushes to main. All right, so let's go ahead and run git push. Guaranteed that I have some typos in this YAML file, but let's go ahead and see how close we got. So we're gonna go into the Actions tab inside of our repo. And notice we have this GitHub Actions workflow for GHP and index update. Now, I do have a red X here, so something happened during my deployment. So unable to resolve actions / upload GitHub Pages artifacts. And the reason here is because I had a typo. So like I said, pretty sure that I made a mistake there. So let's go ahead back and fix that. Go back to VS Code, and it's going to be upload pages artifact, not artifacts. All right, let's go ahead and save this change. See how close we get this time. So fix typo. Go ahead and push this up again. Git push. All right, jump back to GitHub, check out actions. Notice since I pushed directly to main, showing me my commit that basically kicked off the build. And we can see the various stages here. If I go to build and deploy, here are the steps that I provided inside of my file. So setup job, there's the checkout, there's the setup node, installing the dependencies, there is building the project, and we can see the output at each step here. Here is the build output to artifacts. So it went ahead and uploaded the artifact. So here is my code that was built, the artifact that it created for that. And looks like there was an issue, failed to create deployment with build version, and it says invalid environment node ID. All right, so this issue seems to stem from the environment not being correct. So if you look at the action/deploy pages GitHub repository, you can see that there is a environment section here. And basically when you run this deployment, it deploys to a special environment called GitHub Pages. So we need to make sure that we are specifying this section here. So I'm gonna go ahead and just copy this. All right, and so right inside of our job, right after the build and deploy, which is the name of the job, when it says runs on Ubuntu latest, we're also going to add the environment, and it's going to need to be indented. So it's going to run on Ubuntu. It's going to deploy to this environment called GitHub Pages, and this is the URL of that page. So let's go ahead and save this. Let's go ahead and double check with our, so runs on Ubuntu latest, environment is at the same level, and let's go ahead and commit that change. So add GHP environment, go ahead and commit that and push. And that action in and of itself should kick off our job. So let's go into our actions tab. Go ahead and click on our currently running job, which is build and deploy to GitHub Pages. All right, and this time you can see the deploy to GitHub Pages was successful. So it found the artifact, creating a pages deployment with the payload. So it's basically passing along that build output, created this deployment with this specific ID and reported success. Job cleans up and gets everything done. So you can see we have a green check mark here. And now if we go back to our settings and click on pages, we can see that it was last deployed by me just now. And if I visit the site, if everything works correctly, we can see we have hello from GitHub Actions deployment. So what's super cool now is anytime that we make a change to this main branch, we'll automatically kick off the build and redeploy our site. So let's go ahead and check this out one more time and notice how we don't have to run any special deploy scripts or change it to any special branch. We're just using GitHub Actions to build and deploy our site for us. So let's go ahead and just make a quick change, and inside of my app.jsx, I'm gonna go ahead and just change this to say thank you for watching, like, and subscribe. Especially if you learned anything or found this information valuable, definitely consider liking and subscribing, because we're gonna be covering a lot more about Git, GitHub, web development, and everything else in between. So if that's what you're into, definitely consider hitting that like button and joining us for more coding. So let's go ahead and stage this change. Say update message. Go ahead and click commit, push up these changes. And now if we go check our actions tab, kicked off a new deployment of our site, and it should run through this relatively quick. Created a new deployment. All right, and if I go ahead and refresh this, there's my green check mark. There's my build and deploy. And if I go back to the GitHub Pages section inside of settings, visit the site again, and notice how still shows the old message, but if I refresh, there we go. Thank you for watching, like, and subscribe. So there's a little bit of caching going on. Sometimes you might have to manually refresh or do a hard refresh on your browser, but once the deployment is successful, you should be able to see your updates anytime you make a change to your main branch. And so that is how you deploy a GitHub Pages site, React application, or basically any framework-based application with a build step to GitHub Pages using GitHub Actions. All right, that is going to go ahead and do it for this video. Thank you so much for coding along with me today. If you like this video and found this information valuable, please consider leaving me a like down below. And if you're new here, please consider subscribing. We're going to be covering a lot more about Git, GitHub, web development, HTML, JavaScript, CSS, and pretty much everything else in between. So if that's what you're into, definitely consider subscribing so you can be notified when we publish more videos just like this one. All right, well, until next time, be sure to stay curious, never stop learning, and I will see you all in the next video.